Hello people, my name is Dr. Bharat. I am an MD and I specialize in internal medicine. The topic for today's discussion is diabetes type 2 basics, and in particular we study pathophysiology. Pathophysiology means the mechanism by which a person gets afflicted by any disease. So the basic question today we'll be answering is, how does a person get affected by diabetes, that is type 2 diabetes, which especially affects the adults. Before we jump into the topic, let us ask ourselves a simple question. Why should we be studying diabetes? What is the reason that we should know about diabetes? So, diabetes belongs to a class of diseases which are known as lifestyle related diseases. Lifestyle related diseases are nothing but the altered pathophysiology which results in certain abnormalities in our bodily functions. So, our lifestyle affects us a lot. To understand any disease, we have to know something called two-hit theory. For any person to get affected by any disease, there should be at least two factors which are responsible for the causation of the disease. One, genetic makeup, which we cannot change, which we are born with. Okay? So, every person has got something called DNA, which defines our genetics, that is the traits which we get from our ancestors. In those traits, even health traits are a part, and by birth, every person is susceptible to some set of diseases by virtue of the genetics. We will discuss about that in a later video. So, for the time being, what you have to understand is that every person by birth is susceptible to some diseases. Okay, that's what we call genetic susceptibility. The second thing we have to understand is our environment. Environment means the milieu or the ecosystem in which we live, which includes our lifestyle, our environment, our dietary habits, and so on and so forth. Now, what happens is, especially in type 2 diabetes, remember, diabetes is of two types, which we discuss in another video. Type 2 diabetes is the one which affects the adults, especially people who are above the age of 30 usually get affected by it. But even younger people are getting affected by it, by different new types of diabetes, which again we'll discuss in another video. Having said that, type 2 diabetes is familial, is strongly familial. That means for a person to get affected by type 2 diabetes, he should have certain genes which make him susceptible to getting type 2 diabetes. But that is not sufficient. A person also should have a lifestyle which contributes to the causation of the diabetes. So, a person should have that also. Otherwise, you don't get diabetes. Okay? Remember two-hit theory. These two hits should be satisfied. Again, this is a very lengthy topic. We will discuss about it in a later video. Now, let's jump into the pathophysiology. Pathophysiology in layman terms means why a person should get a disease. What is the mechanism that is causing the disease? Every person is made up of cells. Okay? Cells are tiny units. Every person is made up of billions of them. A cell is a functional unit of every organism. Every living organism has cells, and we also have cells. So, we have to look at our cells first. Okay? The cell size ranges from nanometers to microns. Okay? So, let us forget about all those things. For our understanding, let us understand that cells are very teeny tiny organelles which make up our body. Okay? Now, when you look at a cell might look like this. Any cell has an outer membrane which we call plasma membrane. Now, this is very important. This plasma membrane is very important, especially in understanding diabetes. We'll come to that later. We'll see the other components of the cell. Every cell has got a nucleus which is in the center of it, and this nucleus has got the chromosomes which contain the DNA, that is our genetic material. And one more thing we have to understand inside the cell is every cell has got another organelle which we call mitochondria. So every cell has got plasma membrane, nucleus which contains the genetic material, and an organelle which goes by the name mitochondria. Now the function of this mitochondria, it acts as the powerhouse of the cell. Okay. Now for our regular living we need energy. Okay. So who exactly needs energy in our body? The cells, because cells are the functional units of the human body. Okay. Now to generate power, for example, take a powerhouse. In a powerhouse you want to generate electricity. How do you do that? How do you accomplish that? You need some fuel, right? So even our human body requires our fuel, which we take it in the form of food. Okay. Now let us look at the chemical nature of the food that we eat. Any food that we consume can be divided into 3 basic chemical compounds. The first one is called carbohydrates, or the fancy word carbs, which most of the celebrities use nowadays. The second component are proteins, and the third component is fat. The carbohydrates provide us with the energy that is required for the day-to-day activities of the body. Proteins are responsible for building our body. Fat is a kind of reserve energy which our body stores for the future use. Okay. Usually carbohydrates, they constitute about 65 to 75% of our diet by mass. Okay. Proteins constitute about 15 to 25%, and fats constitute 5 to 15%. Now I am speaking for a human being, any human being from any part of the world. Usually their normal diets constitutes these kind of percentages. The subtle variations are dependent on the region, the dietary habits of the people, the lifestyle of the person, and the personal choices. So those are all many variables, but when you generalize the diet of the world population, usually these kind of percentages are maintained by mass. Now we will concentrate on carbohydrates, because these are the ones which are very important in understanding what is diabetes and how does one get affected by it. Now let us have a look at our digestive system. Okay, this is the mouth. Okay, the mouth. The mouth is connected to pharynx, and this pharynx opens into a tube-like structure which is present around here. Okay, at this part. This is called food pipe in colloquial language. Scientifically it is called esophagus. The esophagus joins a bag-like structure which we call stomach. Okay, it is just present above the navel, and just in front of the stomach there is an organ by name pancreas. So the pancreas looks like a cucumber, and when you touch it, it feels like a wet cloth. Pancreas is a specialized gland which produces many chemicals, and most of these chemicals which are produced by the structure pancreas, they are required for our normal digestive process. Apart from those enzymes which aid in the digestive process, pancreas also secretes some specialized chemicals which are known as hormones. These hormones are required for the normal metabolism, and one of those hormones which is very important for our normal metabolism, it is called insulin. Now let us go back to the carbohydrates which we were discussing and which we stopped abruptly. Whatever may be the carbohydrate that you eat, whether it be your staple food or whether it is a junk food that you eat once in a while, ultimately all the carbohydrates are broken down into only one type of molecule, which is indicated here by its chemical composition C6H12O6. The chemistry students must be knowing this very well. It is also known as glucose. So all the carbohydrates that we eat, once they are digested, they become glucose. And this glucose is very important because our cells cannot absorb all the other carbohydrates or the complex carbohydrates that we consume. Most of the carbohydrates that we consume, they are known as complex carbohydrates because they are nothing but the polymers of this single molecule. Let us go further back again to our cell. Okay. So we said all the carbohydrates are broken down into glucose ultimately. Now this glucose is the fuel for the cells. We said cells have a powerhouse by name mitochondria. Okay. This powerhouse requires fuel, and the fuel for this powerhouse is glucose. All the cells in our body, they function by generating energy from the glucose, which is nothing but the digested ultimate product of carbohydrate metabolism. Now for this glucose to enter into the cell, there are some gates. In fact, these are called as glucose transporters, GLUT for short. Okay, because this plasma membrane which envelops every cell in our body doesn't permit all the molecules that are present in our blood or serum to enter inside the cell. This plasma membrane has got variable permeability. That means cells as living structures, they choose which molecules to enter and which molecules to not to enter. And glucose is one of the essential molecules which are permitted to enter inside the cell. But to permit this passage, the cell maintains a molecule by name glucose transporter. It is a complex protein molecule which transports glucose across the cell membrane. For all the practical purposes, we can understand that this glucose transporter is a kind of a door which permits the entry of glucose molecules into the cell. Okay. Now we all know about the doors, right? Who doesn't know about doors? When you want to enter into a house, when you want to enter into a room, you need to open a door. But before opening the door, what do you do? You have to open a key, right? So every door has a lock, and the lock needs a key to be opened, right? So this is where our insulin plays the part. Remember the insulin, which is a specialized molecule which is secreted from pancreas. So the insulin secreted by pancreas is nothing but a key to this door, which is also known as GLUT or glucose transporter. Now let us see what is happening in type 2 diabetes mellitus. So we have to remember these two things. Insulin, which is nothing but the key which opens the door. The door with the lock is GLUT or glucose transporter, which is a door which permits the entry of glucose into the cell. Now what is happening in diabetes type 2? Remember the two-hit theory. Now in the two-hit theory, we said there is a genetic component and there is an environmental component. So the genetic component is that with which we are born, is that in individuals who are susceptible to type 2 diabetes, they have either lesser number of these glucose transporters, less number, or their structure is altered. That means the lock has been changed. Now what happens when the lock is changed? Can you open the door with the same key? No, it is not possible. So that is what is happening. In people who are susceptible to type 2 diabetes, the glucose transporter or the door with the lock has been changed because of the genetic predisposition, because of which the key, the insulin, is not working at the target, that is at the glucose transporter level. That means which we call in other words as insulin resistance. Now remember, some amount of insulin resistance is present in these individuals from the time of birth, but it doesn't manifest because our body has got the innate ability to compensate for whatever the shortcomings that can be compensated. So the first hit is the genetic makeup or genetic predisposition, which we explained in terms of insulin resistance. And the second hit is environmental insult, which in this condition means altered lifestyle. By altered lifestyle, what do we mean? Consumption of high amounts of sugar, which is not necessary for the body. 2. Consumption of high amounts of salt, again which is not necessary for the body. 3. Sedentary lifestyle, that means either not doing exercise at all or not being active enough, which is required for our normal life. And 4, this is the last one, but it is the most important one, the tension life. The 21st century life is like a pressure cooker. We are all living under lot of pressure and tensions in our life. And this is one of the most important factors which results in type 2 diabetes. So we explained the insulin resistance part, which is because of the genetic predisposition. Now when a person has insulin resistance, our body tries to compensate it by producing more and more amounts of insulin, so that it can push all those extra sugars which we have been consuming because of our altered lifestyle into the cells, so that it can reduce the blood sugar down, which is normal, right? Our blood sugar has to be under 100 when we are fasting, 100 milligrams per deciliter when we are fasting, and at any point of the day, if you check your blood sugar, it should be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter, okay? And our body tries to achieve it by producing more amount of insulin, because if it produces normal amount of insulin, this insulin resistance is not going to let our body maintain the normal sugar level. So our body produces more and more amounts of insulin, and in that process what is happening is that the pancreas, remember we told that pancreas looks like a long cucumber, and when we touch it feels like a wet cloth, right? And this wet cloth is dripping water. In this case, pancreas is dripping insulin. Now because of this overactivity, our body is stimulating the pancreas again and again and again, and because of this overactivity, what is happening is that the pancreas is getting tired and it is getting dried out. So the simple analogy is that you take a wet cloth, you squeeze it, what happens? It produces more amount of water, but only to a limit. Once the amount of water that is present inside a wet cloth is finished, the wet cloth won't produce any more water, right? The same thing applies here. So what is happening in the case of pancreas? Pancreas has something called beta cells which produce the insulin, okay? And by the increased demand of the insulin, to compensate for the insulin resistance, the cells work harder and longer, and in this process they burn out themselves. That means they get damaged, which is known as beta cell burnout. And when this happens, what is happening? The pancreas can no longer produce the amounts of insulin that are required for the normal maintenance of blood glucose. So to summarize, what is happening in type 2 diabetes, the quality of GLUT is decreased. When you come to the quantity of the insulin that is produced, that is also decreased, which ultimately leads to high blood glucose. And this is the pathophysiology of diabetes mellitus. See, diabetes is a very vast topic. There is no part in the body that cannot be affected by diabetes, okay? From head to toe, every part, every organ in our body can be affected by diabetes. Diabetes as such doesn't kill people, but the complications of diabetes, those are the ones which are very dangerous and which are highly lethal, and they are the ones which claim lives in the lives of diabetic people, okay? So diabetes being a very broad subject, today we'll learn only the pathophysiology. We'll see the other aspects of type 2 diabetes in forthcoming videos. I hope you all enjoyed my presentation. Hope you learned something. Hope you have a lot of questions to ask. If you don't have a lot of questions to ask, I think I failed in explaining to you or making it simple enough for a layman to understand what is type 2 diabetes. Thank you. Good night. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Please like, comment and share this video with all your friends and with all their friends and with all your family members and for all those people who wants to learn about diabetes. And also, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and please also press the bell icon so that you can receive notifications whenever I post a new video. Thank you very much.